Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is December 13, year 2022. It is 3 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Welcome, one, welcome all. You're going to be treated to something really, really interesting today. No, the topic is not Kamala Harris per se. Maybe that's why there's not that much interest here in the chat room yet. But I will be treating you to some reveals here about the institutions that have given rise to people like Kamala Harris. Moreover, I'm trying to explore, predict what implications that has for the American political system, for everyday Americans like you and me. Not privileged ones, people who are products of elite transnationals like Kamala Harris, but just everyday people. But I'm speaking cryptically, purposely for now, because I wanted to, before I begin, to make a really exciting announcement, I feel, and that is the return of one Leo Zagami, the author. Yes, indeed. He's up to volume 8, Confessions of an Illuminati. Excellent work. I'm sure many of you have been reading his books as they appear, volume by volume, and his lovely wife, Christy Zagami, Mrs. Christy Zagami, also has 2 volumes of her own writings. I don't know if he's working on a third, but Leo Zagami will be focusing, and this is going to be next week. It's going to be a live stream. He's going to be focusing on music, popular music primarily. And he was a DJ. Maybe he still does it, but professionally, he was doing DJ work. And he's going to be talking a lot about pop music. I won't go, he sent me the table of contents. I won't go through them in the interest of time, piece by piece. And the other area that Mr. Zagami is going to be talking about is film, cinema, movies. And I'm particularly interested in a couple of figures from Italian cinema. One is Carlo Ponti, the producer. He's the person that, quote unquote, discovered Sophia Loren and was married to her for many, many years. Trying to figure that one out, that connection there. The other person is Pier Paolo Pasolini, who was he wasn't out at the time, but it was pretty well known that he was a homosexual, and he wound up being beaten up. His body was found beaten. This is back in, I think, in the early '60s. But for sure, Mr. Zagami has agreed to speak a little bit about the Italian horror genre director by the name of Dario Argento. Right? Does that name sound familiar? Yeah, you might know the actress Asia Argento or Asia Argento. She was the girlfriend. I don't know if they were married, but she was close to the one and only Tony Bow. That is right, Anthony Bourdain. So I'm trying to tease out the relationship between your father being this horror director, typically low budget, his daughter, and Tony Bow, who I revealed, by the way, in one of my earlier talks, to have a connection, a familial connection to French intelligence, right? That's why he was traveling the world posing as a connoisseur of different cultures and different cuisines. And it's something that we've seen before with Julia Child. Remember? Well, you might not remember, but she had a PBS show as a sort of a bumbling cook. This is before the big foodie fad came into being, but she was on PBS, and as it turned out, she had a background in American intelligence, OSS, something like that. So that's going to be interesting. And by the way, while I'm on the programmatic notes, something's happened to my playlist. I don't know what went wrong with it, but if you subscribe, to this channel, you will be getting all the notifications as they come on. But if you can't find my more recent work, once you get into YouTube, just write in the little space there, Professor Hamamoto, and it'll take you to the most recent talks that I'm giving, because the playlist is absent about, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 weeks of material, and people think, what happened? But you can't find it. It's just, I guess, a form of shadow banning. because my work, even though I have only, 10,500 subscribers, and I'd like you to subscribe while you think of it and have others subscribe and like it. Although I have a small subscription level of quality viewers, most of the looky-loos have passed through. I've kind of filtered, and they've probably realized most of this stuff's over their head anyway. Um, Even then, I feel that there's a segment of the audience out there that I'm missing, and I'm going to be before the end of 2023. I want to garner more people from these different constituencies, um, professionals, right? Where they're in law, academia, doesn't matter, in the sciences, the humanities, whatever it might be, writers, um, people in media, filmmakers, musicians, producers, right? That's the segment that uh, I'm going to be cultivating in 2023, along with everybody else. So that's the agenda for 2023. We're going to end really strongly on, I think it's the 29th, the last Thursday of the month of this month, December. I will be with my friend and colleague, John O'Loughlin. If you're in the East Coast, it'll be evening, but if you're in the Pacific time, I'll be here. I think it's 6 o'clock. Yeah, I'll get the information for you. 5 o'clock, but it's going to be the last Thursday. But preceding that, I'm doing my regular show, and I have enough material now to start letting loose some of the information I've been gathering on the so-called Pasadena tournament of Rosicrucianism. And yes, it's you thought I was going to say tournament of roses, but I have found otherwise. Anyway, I'll leave it at that for now. So you'll have a lot to look forward to. Now let's start off really strongly here, so you get an idea the importance of one Kamala Harris and what she represents. Most of us have it fresh in our memory, right? The scar tissue has not formed quite yet, but most of us have a memory of this photo of her, dressed, of course, in the color purple, which was the title of a novel, right? Alice Walker, who um, bills herself not as a feminist, but as a womanist, right? It's a little bit of wordplay there, but I thought about it more deeply, and I think I understand what Alice Walker was hinting at. By the way, she taught at Wellesley College for a while. I think they got rid of her. They had a tendency to get rid of promising writers. They'd bring them through, and of course, she went on to become a literary celebrity, and the film was later, or the novel was later brought to the screen by one and only Steven Spielberg. Right, so that's the color purple. It's royal purple. It's also the color of women, right? She's a womanist, as she calls it. And these are the women that go their own way in American society, right? And you might hear me side slip into a little bit of dialect today, because I have a very fond memory of living in the ghetto of South Central Los Angeles since I was Japanese background, Oriental. All the colored people had to live together under segregation. So I have what is called a ghetto pass. All right, I got a ghetto pass, and I'm allowed access to Black culture in which I was steeped, in which I was reared. My dad had a business right on Exposition Boulevard, right not far from the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, not far from the University of California, the University of Southern California, or as we call it, the University of Spoiled Children, right on Exposition Boulevard. And his business was called Nisei Greenhouses. Right, that was a tribute to his being second generation second generation Japanese American. So that makes me third generation. So that was a business. That's where I grew up on that. And right in the middle of what some people call, I didn't realize it then, they call it the ghetto. I didn't really view it as that. Um, so the reason I mention it is because people like this, Kamala Harris, they're poseurs or posers. They're synthetic. They're creations. Okay, and I'll get to what I mean before that. But there are creations that have to be initiated. I guess that's the best way to put it. And one of the big discoveries, one of the major discoveries, which I'm about to reveal to you here in the live chat. Thank you for being here with me. And please share it with other people because this is going to be a mind blower, right? This is a discovery, Professor Hamamoto. And this is why I like to do these talks. I really get to drill down and I get to study the secret societies, the ancient nine. This is a novel, fairly recent, about the black bourgeoisie. That's right. I grew up in the ghetto, but I did not grow up amongst the black bourgeoisie. Although my father did move the family briefly to Baldwin Hills, which was known as the Black Beverly Hills because there was still segregation. So all the doctors and dentists and the school principals could live outside the ghetto in Baldwin Hills because they couldn't go to Beverly Hills or to Malibu or some of the other, all white neighborhoods. But so that's where, even though my dad couldn't afford it, in fact, I think he went bankrupt. He lost the house. We had to move, and that's how we wound up in Orange County. So there's multiple classes, and I'm going to talk about one that people don't really know about, and that's the upper class. That's the bougies, as we called them in the '60s, the black bourgeoisie. And the famed sociologist E. Franklin Fraser wrote a book on that class, the black bourgeoisie. He's talking about these people who come out of the historically black colleges and universities, who typically, by the way, were funded by capitalists who needed a black intermediary class in order to implement their top-down capitalist policies and lay them out to the African American community, the colored people, their intermediaries. And that's where Kamala Harris comes in. And that's why I refer to her as being, what did I say? Being part of a bio-sorority. Because the contention here that I'm making is that not just blacks, but there's two main groups, black and Latino, or Latinx. If you're an academic, Chicano studies, it used to be called, now it's Latinx, right? Because Latino and Latina denote gender differences. And as you know, there's no more gender, at least in their minds. That's what they think. But we gonna fool them, right? So you got what I call the bio mammy mafia. There are going to be women, black women's. And then you got the bio mamacitas. And these are the Latinas who are being positioned in this intermediary position by the Rockefellers, by the Sacklers, by the usual hereditary banking families who are going to, they think they're going to ride herd on the rest of us. So first of all, they have to diminish the men in their own communities, like the black men. They help put them in jail, put them in prison, right? Give them the crack cocaine, or if they're like high level music executives, a black woman, they'll promote what some people consider misogynist lyrics or groups talking about bitches and hoes, right? And skanky chicken heads and, whatever's come. They're promoting that. These are black women, right? But they come from like Howard University. They come from one of the historically black colleges and universities who get jobs with EMI, MCA, Sony, Universal, whatever it might be, okay? And they're also heavily in banking. I mean, they're all over corporate America, and they're marrying into the Jewish financial community. They're marrying not very many Asians yet. They got something special for the yellow people. I don't know quite. I think I have an idea what they got up their sleeve for us, but that's another talk. But they definitely are positioning the mamacitas and the mammies to ride herd over the biopharmaceutical plantation that we're being pushed into. So, I used to be in ethnic studies, and I dealt quite a bit with a lot of Latinas. They call themselves Latina Marxist feminists. And part of their agenda was to diminish the role of Latinos, right? Men, fellow Mexican Americans for the most part, or Puerto Ricans, anybody who falls under. I won't go into specifics of it, and their husbands and their partners and whatnot, or girlfriends, kind of reflected this idea that they were going to be the head mamacita in charge, and that's where the culture is going. And also, these professors and their grad students relentlessly promoted abortion to their students. I saw it when there was a big altar, uh, Mexican style traditional altar with the candelas and the photos and everything. And the message was, you got to abort that little baby. All right. So they're going to take, control of their own society through Mamacita. And of course, that's all headed by the Sackler family and, the Pritzkers, all the old biopharmaceutical mafia that's destroying humanity. And at the other end, you've got you know about Eunice Rivers, right? She was the black nurse who, according to the lore, convinced a lot of non-literate black men to submit to these notorious Tuskegee experiment. Right? Most of you know that's Eunice Rivers. So that's one of the intuitions or the insights I had about this connection here. But we need them, we meaning the pharmaceutical state, not me, but they need high level attorneys, corporate executives, media people, all the way, and of course elected officials like the synthetic Kamala Harris, in order to mediate the extermination of the black male population and the black race in general. Because you notice in the popular culture, black and African American people are being elevated right now with, Black Panther and you name it. Blacks are way overrepresented in the media, right? And that's outside of sports, right? We know about the sports, but in general, the black population is not over 12%, but they're everywhere. Okay, and that is a prelude to the collapse, to the fall. It's like building up Michael Jackson, plunging him, building up Prince, plunging him, building up Bill Cosby, plunging him. Right, who, by the way, was a fraternity member. We're going to focus on a black fraternity member, or a member of a black, that is African American fraternity, but we're going to focus on the sororities here. Okay, that's power, because it's female power that's being pushed here, and it's going to be filtered through the mamacita and the mammy, I call them biomammies. All right, so that's one of the reasons why there was an occultic initiation of Kamala Harris into the political system in the recent election. Whether you think it's legitimate or not, or whether it was stolen or not, I'll leave that for you and Pillow Man to decide, right? Like it or not, Biden and Harris are in office right now. So here it is, just a reminder. Here she is in the color purple. And look at that photo there. Recall, this was up for dispute for a while. People said, look at that. She doesn't have her hand on the Bible. She's got it in her pocketbook. That must mean she's a heathen, right? Well, I'm not going to address whether she's a heathen or not, but that line of thinking was disabused by certain, websites that are maybe Politico or one of the leftist ones that are always falling in line with the mainstream, including Republicans, by the way. It's not just a Republican versus Democrat issue. And they found out that it was a missile. It's spelled Missal. And if you went to catechism, are you a Roman Catholic? I was not, but I did go to catechism, and I did have a couple missals myself, one for children and one for adults. And what a missal does is show, because this is, I think, before Vatican II, and the rituals of Roman Catholic traditional, they're very complex, and you might not be able to follow it unless you have a guidebook for the liturgy. I'm simplifying here, but that's what a missal is. But the point is that when I thought back to it in researching this for today, I said, you know what? She's got her hand on a missal, but a missal is not the Holy Bible. It's like how to do the Stations of the Cross during Mass, but there's no scripture in it. There might be some excerpt, but there's no New Testament in there. There's no Old Testament. There's the Bible is absent. So here she is, Kamala Harris, being sworn in by her husband. I can go on about this power couple, right? And if I have time, I'll show you a video. It's a really cute meat type story. It comes like something like Nora Ephron romantic comedy. What's called in the rom-com genre, it's called the cute meet. How did Harry meet Sally? Okay, so they have this well-rehearsed. In fact, they probably went to Hollywood and tapped one of their Democratic flunky friends in the writing community and said, could you write us a cute meet story about how Dougie and Cammie met, and we got married, even though, we don't have really interest in the opposite sex, but, for propriety's sake, and, I might become president, I think America's not ready for well, actually, they are ready. They voted one previously. They're called Barack and Michael, but maybe, they want to be on the down low still, if you know what I'm saying. So here is the explanation why. This is the occult explanation, the esoteric reason why Kamala Harris used the missal. It wasn't on her pocketbook; it was the missal, because if you blow it up, you can see the cover and there's a little zipper around it to protect it, right? And this is the missal, and it belonged to John F. Kennedy, right? The slain president. This was his missal here. And it's in it was missing for a while, but it's been located. It's probably in the LBJ Presidential Library on the campus of the University of Texas. I visited there, by the way, and I stayed a day or two extra. I was invited to give a talk at the University of Texas. And it was given, by the way, in the Lady Bird Johnson room. It's very exclusive, very nice. They got a lot of money. That university is very, very wealthy. It has a huge endowment. It's like, I think it's even larger than Harvard. It's quite a setup there. But it's a public institution. It's not, there's private power that run the private public institution. So here you have it again. This is read this carefully. It says it was used in the swearing-in ceremony on Air Force One, November 22nd, and that's when President Kennedy was assassinated. The retinue, including Lyndon Baines Johnson and Lady Bird, was at his side, were gathered together after it was announced officially that President Kennedy had expired due to his wounds at the Parkland Memorial Hospital. So our Constitution says, and before the President of the United States can take office, he has to be, or she, the President has to be sworn into office. But he was sworn in. The story goes, and again, I'm just repeating what I read. We'd have to really check this out. But apparently, the press secretary to John F. Kennedy, Jack Valenti, who later went on to become the head of the MPA, the Motion Picture Association. He was the head lobbyist for that, right? Again, to show you to demonstrate the connection between the state and media, including film, right? That's Jack Valenti. So in fact, Jack Valenti just picked this up. And Air Force One, most of you know, is the presidential. So I think it's a Boeing 707 at the time. It's with, and the vice president flies on Air Force Two, even to this day. So he picked it up, Jack Valenti. It had a cross on a crucifix, and he thought it was a Bible. He should know better. I think he's Roman Catholic. He should know what, for one thing, a missal's very thin. It's not very big. And that was John F. Kennedy's personal prayer book, or missal that he carried with him, to study, to as a talisman. I don't know, but it was John F. Kennedy. So she appropriated that. She brought it to the uh, swearing in ceremony. And of course, it's invalid because she's not directly swearing on the Bible. There's a Bible underneath it, but why the missile on top, right? I think it's being used to signal some. Here's some historic photos from the time. I can't remember the name of the photographer, but you can look it up if you're that interested. Here's the female judge. Maybe this is one of the reasons why, because she's all about the color purple, right? Right? Women, crazy ass women, according to Alice Walker, who will wear the color purple and a red hat, mismatched, just crazy. They don't care about convention. And of course, they don't care about men's. Men's be undependable. They run off, they impregnate you and they leave you on welfare and they take up with multiple women, right? Which is part of the plan, by the way, of a great society. Implemented by who else? LBJ. So maybe that's another area, another thread that connects Kamala Harris with LBJ, who some historians claim was an integral part of the assassination plot. I'll leave that for you to decide. Here's another one of the photos. This is the female judge. Her name is Sarah Hughes, I believe, Sarah T. Hughes, and she has the missile in her hand there, and LBJ is about ready to be sworn into office. Lady Bird is right below his chin, and other officials that can be identified if you want to, right? And then we move to the next one. Here is the swearing in. This is the photo this one's cropped, but this is the photo we usually remember when we're hearkening back to those days. And to the right is the grieving Jacqueline Kennedy, right? Or Jackie, as we fondly refer to us. And she's standing there. I think it's a Chanel suit. And this is cropped, but if you look down, there's blood, down the front. And she was asked if this is anecdotal. I don't know if it's true. You'll have to check it out. But the story that sticks out in my mind is that she didn't want to change her suit because she wanted the public to know about the slaying. So that in itself has a really heavy ritualistic connotation, right? The slain president and Lyndon Johnson being sworn in, not on the Holy Bible, but on a missile. So you might even argue that he was an illegitimate president on two levels. One, he went in through an assassination, and secondly, he wasn't even sworn in to office properly, right? Okay, here's another one, and here he's turning to Jacqueline Kennedy. I don't know what went on, but he was consoling, I guess. Lady Bird looks like she's full of glee, and the judge in the far left-hand bottom corner, that's Judge Hughes, is saying some words of consolation, I assume. And check this one out. This is the other famous conspiracy photo, and this is where Lyndon Johnson is getting a wink from a Texas congressman, right? Like, okay, mission accomplished. So this is the origin. This is the backstory of the missile on that fateful inauguration day, which is still being contested, and they're still the government is still trying to prosecute people who are supposedly trying to subvert the takeover. You might argue the takeover happened, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. This is sort of like maybe closing the loop, right? And thanks to someone who's a product of a historically Black college, Howard University, that's Kamala Harris. And more importantly, the secret society that was founded, I believe, in 1908 to serve the needs of what they call themselves finer womanhood. I'm trying to figure out what that means. But I think what it means is colored women, right, of privilege, of even wealth, right, hereditary wealth, like maybe 4 or 5 generations worth already. And yes, just like E. Franklin Fraser laid it out, there is a Black bourgeoisie, and it's much larger and it's much powerful than people in 2022 realize. because most Americans and most people around the world thinking African America is all, like the song by War, like the world is a ghetto. It's all ghetto music. It's all Ye West, even though his parents were educators too. I don't know if they went to a historically black college or university. I think his mother has a PhD. She taught. So he comes out of that background, and there are any number of prominent. I mean, I learned from reading this book. This is highly recommended. Not just about black sororities and fraternities as such, but about American history, because the connection between the historically black colleges and the fraternities and sororities and American history, and consequently world history, is like that. It's tight like that, right? To paraphrase Bessie Smith, one of those nasty songs, right? That the finer womanhood would never be caught listening to or singing about. All that Bessie Smith, all that blues, all that country folk stuff, all that Mississippi Delta, that Gitchy, that Gumi, all that like really black African stuff. They wanted to distance themselves from the women and men's, like Harpo, even though Oprah Winfrey from The Color Purple adopted that character's Harpo's name for her company called Harpo. But they weren't going to marry Harpo, right? They're not, these are the finer women. And of course, there were anti-miscegenation laws that prevented them from marrying outright white men. But the common practice among both men and women who wind up at these historically black colleges were to marry the lighter skinned ones in the population. So, if you're black, stay back. If you're brown, stick around. If you're white, you're all right. I didn't make up that rhyme. Okay, I don't want to be accused of plagiarism. If you're yellow, maybe you got a mellow. That is my rhyme. But yeah, if you're black, stay back. If you're brown, stick around. If you're white, you're all right. So that's the color spectrum that even within the African American or colored community back then, that was abided by, and it still is. It's still very much in force. Although I have one friend, I won't give you his name. His wife was very dark skinned, and he used to go around telling me to kind of apologize. I don't think so. I think his wife was really pretty, but he would say, "The blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice." Oh yeah. All right. So I'll leave it up to them to figure out their racial, even within the communities. There's all kinds of stigmas and hierarchies that are involved here, and I'll leave it up to them to work it out. So that's the connection here. All right, let's move to the sorority. Right, we're talking about the secret society. Exoterically, we know that they exist. Let's see, her fraternity, or let's see. Yeah, I have a little video here. I think it's part of a documentary. Let's take a look at it. I don't know if we're going to see all of it. But this is her sorority, and she, from the very beginning, even when she was campaigning, talked about the strength of this secret society in developing her as an individual, as a woman, as a political candidate, now as vice president, and maybe even president of the United States. Here we go, 1908.
In 1908, 9 young ladies, some of them were still teenagers, started Alpha Kappa Alpha. It would create a network for Black women of like minds.
Who thought of this? In 1908. Can you imagine that?
Alpha Kappa Alpha has done some impressive work across the years, from the Mississippi Health Project to the councils. It's not just a sorority in pink and green colors.
I'm a fourth generation, AKA. I just think about the history. It's just an honor.
It's a reminder that the legacy lives and lives for the generations to follow. It speaks for itself. It speaks for itself.
Okay, that documentary is out somewhere. I have to watch it in its entirety. But you heard that one woman was an Alpha Kappa Alpha for what, four generations worth? Some of them go back, to the origins of the sorority, which were founded by, I think they called them the 9 original pearls, something to that effect. And that's why Kamala Harris likes to rock the pearls, because she says it's a tribute to the founding mothers or daughters, if you will, of the sorority to which she belongs. Um, they're connected. They're connected. And by the way, in reading this book here, there's a lot of biographical information here that was compiled by a person himself. He's male, who came out of a Black historical college, I believe, who was a member of an African American fraternity, who married a woman who was a member of the African American sorority. And their two books and their guides, and sort of like whatever the Skull and Bones people hand their membership, they were up there on the shelves, and he started reading and saying, hey, this would make a really good, important history, and it's a really good contribution, I think. Of course, it's, biased, but I certainly learned a lot, including, guess what? Because I said, hey, because by the way, I'm not against sororities or fraternities. It's not something for me because I'm not a joiner. Right? I believe what the maxim that was attributed to Groucho Marx. I wouldn't be part of a club that would admit me, the likes of me, right? So I'm a loner. I'm not a joiner. So that's been a problem for me all the time, or throughout my career. But so I said, man, I wonder if I wanted to join a sorority, a colored sorority. They didn't say African American, or they didn't say Black, or they said colored back then. And sure enough, I look on page 236. They had a Japanese sorority sister. Her name is Shizo Shinzo Suzuki. So I tip my hat to you, sister. I don't know how you wound up in a Black sorority, but more power to you. I hope it helped you in your life chances, as they call it. But for the most part, they are Black, and there might have been a few um, uh, quote unquote white women that were involved. It's mostly, and it works. It's self-help. It's today it's called networking. They share their research. They look after each other. Outside of the family blood ties, they have a community network that they can draw upon from town to town, city to city, and maybe even internationally. So it works. So long as they're not engaged in genocide, or trying to figure out how to realize world conquest, and I really don't see anything about it. It's just not something that I'm interested. And by the way, if you're thinking about this, and I found this out once I got over to UC Davis, where the sorority and fraternity system was very strong. Right when I was going to school, sororities, fraternities were like that, right? Because this is anti-war, it's counterculture times. We're still kind of in that era, but they came back with a vengeance. And I found out at UC Davis it was very strong in what they called Asian interest fraternities and sororities, and I used to make fun of them all the time. Probably because one day in one of my large lectures, before they started clamping down on my enrollments, because I was getting a lot of students interested in the New World Order concept, because I could see what was unfolding leading up to 2020 to 2022. I was doing this back in 2005, I think, talking about New World Order as a lens through which to understand everything: race, ethnicity, gender, what later became GLBTQ, and critical race theory, right? So I had this huge class, and there was a whole row in the very back that these people, some sorority, had staked out for themselves. See, they were going to put a power base within my class. They were going to use my class as a shell for their power. And they were some Asian interest sorority. And I knew because they all wore the same jackets with the Greek letters all on the top. So whenever I had the opportunity in my lectures, I would say something denigrating about so-called Asian interest fraternities and sororities. And eventually they went away, right? Because they realized, they tried to play me, right? And by the way, a lot of the, from what I heard, other institutions like UC Berkeley is a good example. They call it AmScam, Asian American Scam. That's where all the Asian interests people go there, supposedly to listen about race and their ethnic history, but it's mostly to provide some sort of intellectual substance or ballast for their own selfish ends. So that's my take in a nutshell, if in case. So it's a seems to be a cultural universal, and from the anthropological literature that I've read, even in smaller tribal societies, these secret societies are universal. Okay, I can get this into it later, but not today. So we're not going to get away with it. I mean, do away with these institutions. They're here. People network on the basis of their skin color, their race, their language, their ethnicity, what town they came from. In Japanese American society, they have what's called a Kenjinkai. It's like where you came from in Japan. They have a group and they do business with each other. They speak the same dialect, and they know the same landmarks, and it's just a very strong pull. So I'm not really against it as long as they're not trying to figure out how to take over the world and create bioweapons. It seems to be pretty benign and helpful in many ways. The malignancy of these organizations, however, is potent. It's lying dormant. And that's why these institutions, by the way, which are usually funded by multimillionaires, Spelman College, Spelman was a Rockefeller, right? Spelman College was one of those historically Black colleges. But I think her name was Laura Spelman was a Rockefeller. And they realized they needed to create a Black professional class or bourgeoisie to ride herd over the country boys, the farmers, the non-literate ones, especially after the great migration out of the deep south to the industrial north. You know the story, right? So they had to train the administrative elite for that, and that's where this comes in. And I found out in reading some of these bios, a lot of these well-educated women, they have law degrees, MBAs, and PhDs and MDs, or CPAs, or they're teachers. They're professionals, in other words. Okay, a lot of them work for the Federal Reserve. And then I started thinking, I said, oh yeah, I remember Catherine Austin Fitts, who used to work with in the government in finance, so she knows this, and she saw this pattern where certain parts of communities were consciously blighted. They are allowed to go to pot, to go to ruin through criminality, abandonment, and just what they call urban decay, right? Which is part of the banking cycle, right? So in order to maintain that process, there have to be some Black faces who are female, because they're also administering the mammy state, right? Where there's no husband in the home, the welfare state. They have to be in that position in order to make it look like it's not some kind of racist plot like Eunice Rivers. So that's how they enrich themselves at the expense of the rest of the African American community, and not only African American, but also you and me. That's why, well, not the only reason why. That's why I feel it's very important to start recognizing the signs, as we see in Kamala Harris here, of the emerging bio-mamacita welfare state that's going to be based on biological, biometric oppression. But they're the ones who are going to be riding herd over us like an overseer, like we was on a electronic plantation and they're on a horse with a whip and a shotgun, right? If you don't do this, you're going to get that. And of course, we won't resist. I will. I strongly recommend that you not go along with the program. But most Americans will not resist because they've been guilt tripped so much about Black oppression and the poor immigrants, but most of those, so-called Latinx, they're like whiteinos, right? White Tinos, AOC, all right? And the Black ones are the Black bourgeoisie who had wealth and power for 5 generations. You dig? All right, or what's that guy's name? The guy that wants Beto O'Rourke. He's a whitino, right? And the rest of them, who might be, straight up Latinos, were brought in by the Society of Jesus, like Xavier Becerra, who comes from California. He was the Secretary of State here in California before he got national. So he's another one to look out for, right? Becerra. And I'm not going to play that, see, because I don't feel guilty, since I grew up with Mexicans and Black or colored people and people from Appalachia, so-called white people, and the Orientals, mostly Chinese and Japanese kids, right? I don't have to feel guilty calling you out. And that includes J.D. Vance, the guy who was a student of Tiger Mama Amy Chua over at Yale Law School, who's going to be running for president one day. He's, oh yeah, hillbilly elegy. I was a white trash hillbilly, and I got into Yale University. I was in law school, and now I'm going to rule. I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that one bit, J.D. Vance. All right, because you've been studying the popular culture, and you can understand the resentment that people, everyday people, have against the white shoe boys of privilege. So we got to create these synthetics like J.D. Vance or Kamala Harris. You like that head shake? Yeah, okay, all right. Don't ask me to twerk. You won't like that. All right, let me move on a little bit with the self-celebration of Black Pride. All right. I'm sorry to be denigrating by it, but by the way, I team taught, just to give you my ghetto cred, all right, my blackness cred, my ghetto pass. We get my ghetto pass renewed here. I team taught a class at Cal State Long Beach years ago, before I was at Davis. I was bouncing around. Right, I team taught a class with Maulana Karenga, Dr. Maulana Karenga. He was known as Ron Karenga back in the shootout at UCLA, when the two different factions, and later he was outed as an FBI informant. Every community has a bunch of snitches running around it. Like, he was one of them, right? But I team taught a class with him, and he's the inventor of Kwanzaa, which is topical, right? Supposedly it's Kwanzaa time. He's the guy that invented Kwanzaa. Nice guy, by the way, and a serious scholar, highly intelligent. But he was working he was an informant, just like that. I'll do a whole talk on a Japanese American guy, Aoki, who was turned out to be a Fed and was informing on all these organizations that were supposedly helping the different communities into political power. So I'm telling you this because this is how the political process works on a non-electoral. The election, when you come to an election, it's like almost too late. All the groundwork has been laid at the basic grassroots level, including these synthetic community organizations and these controlled fraternities and sororities. So let's get a little bit more flavor of all the self-celebration going on here.
Leslie, it was incredible. You know this just as I do as members of Delta Sigma Theta, how important sisterhood is. And to be here as 13 of Vice President Kamala Harris's line sisters gathered to have a watch party, to watch her ascend to the second highest position in our nation, it was incredible. There were cheers, there were even some tears, there was a special poem for the occasion, but more than anything else, there was hope. There was hope that no little girl will ever have to question how high she can reach or how much she can attain, and for that, her line sisters want to tell her how very proud of her they are.
Watch my Alpha Kappa Alpha line sister clear hurdles with Artemis ease while the world watches the foot strikes of her perseverance.
Today, millions of people watched from their homes as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were sworn into office. But in the backyard of a house in Hyattsville, 13 women gathered with chucks on their feet, pearls on their necks, and so much pride in their hearts as they watched their sister become the 49th Vice President of the United States.
So today was really magical. What makes it even more special is that we have been in communication all.
Okay, so she's expounding through her dog muzzle, right? who's really in charge? Is it Sister Kamala Harris? I don't think so, but you get the point. Here's another a news item. By the way, the reason that I picked this graphic to illustrate the YouTube deal is that is their symbol, the rose, the pink rose, and I'm going to be doing the Rose Bowl, remember, at the end of the month. And also, this is their secret hand sign, I guess. I don't know what it means, But and as you know, some people say, I'll I'll accept it. She calls herself a black woman. Some people say she's not a black woman. Her father was a professor from Jamaica, I think, a product of slave owners, probably from the British Isles initially with a sugar plant, sugar cane. And the mother was a immigrant from India, but not anyone. She was one of these transnational elites. And get this, she was a cancer researcher. Ooh, that deserves looking into. So again, I'm telling you this because these are all put positive spin on, like it's some sort of empowerment exercise here for all of us, and it's just the opposite. It's enslavement. We're going into the Bio-Mammy plantation, the Bio-Mamacita, Latifunda, right? The hacienda.
Brown, who once dated Harris, says he's excited a black woman is on a presidential ticket.
He also clarified some comments he wrote recently in his column that said running for vice president would end her career.
If you really want to make an immediate change in criminal reform, if you want an immediate change in diversity for representation purposes, you're better off if you have power where no one gives you orders.
Well, that's disingenuous. He took orders from corporate, mostly Bank of America, which the headquarters were in San Francisco. He's a product of Bank of America before they brought in a new crop of people, thanks to Jonestown, I believe in the Moscone, Harvey Milk executions, which I've covered in a previous topic. That's Willie Brown. That was one of his sponsors. I don't think they were ever lovers because I don't think Kamala Harris is interested in men. I don't think her synthetic husband is interested in women. They're a bearded couple, right? That's cool. Doesn't really matter to me. But what does matter to me is the fact that they are perpetrating a fraud, right? That she represents us. She has no legitimacy. She got into office with her hand on a missile, not the Bible. And there are other anomalies that we can talk about, including her family background. And that's Willie Brown. Now, he is a man I respect. He comes from the old school. He's just, he hustled his way up to the top. But he was a mentor to Kamala Harris. He did lead her down certain career paths while she was trying to get in San Francisco. And later, she became the Attorney General. And most of you know that her record of incarcerating black men, young black men, was worse than any other previous attorney general of any ethnicity. In other words, she was incarcerating her quote unquote own people. And that's a matter of record. That's what I'm talking about, is that you got the black female bourgeoisie who's coming out of these elite school, the Divine Nine fraternities and sororities, who are riding herd on the black community. And now they're going to widen it out to guilt trip the rest of America into accepting someone like Kamala Harris. It could be someone else, but don't fall for the scam, right? Do not believe the hype. They are selling wolf tickets. All right. So then she marries this guy who's not even black, right? She might be part Jewish herself. Jews migrated into primarily Western, what is now Western India, right? There are these communities of Jews in China. They're just part of the diaspora. So maybe it's a homecoming. But I think she got married when she was 57. You can say that she was dedicated to her, she was married to her career. Isn't that usually how the cliche runs? More likely she was, married to Hillary Clinton or someone else.
We just spent time one-on-one with Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. Time to meet her significant other. I don't know, do I call you Doug? How do I address you?
You can call me Doug.
Okay, Doug. But of course, he isn't just Doug. Doug Emhoff will be making history as the first husband of a vice president. First gentleman.
Second gentleman. First, second gentleman.
Okay, I'm afraid for the next week or month or year of your life, you're going to be doing something like you just had to do with me.
Yeah, it's all good.
So second gentleman it is.
There was a whole conversation about, mostly among his friends, whether he should just be called the first dude.
First dude.
And other names that I can't repeat on national television.
Harris and Emhoff met in 2013, a blind date set up by a friend of hers. When you first got the friend who said, there's a guy, maybe your friends were doing this to you all the time, but there's a guy, and he's a good one, and don't Google him.
Yeah.
You totally Googled him, didn't you?
Ooh, this is a reveal.
I've never been asked that.
Ooh.
I did. Kentucky.
Wow. Okay.
Oh, that's so funny you asked me that question. So yes, my best friend set us up on a blind date, and she said, just trust me, just don't even, she wanted me to just kind of go into it, and she said, don't Google him. I did.
She found out he was a Los Angeles lawyer. Of course, he knew she was California Attorney General. He made the first move.
One of my buddies was in town, and we went to the Laker game. And so, we had a couple of beers. I told him the story. I said, what do you think? I said, text her. So we sat there in the stands and came up with this text, which was something like, hey, it's Doug. Awkward. I'm texting you.
He is Doug Emhoff. He is awkward because he's concealing his true sexuality. But yeah, and watching this, I said, man, I'm a Nora Ephron fan. I like, despite all the darkness that comes out of this channel, I am a dedicated romantic comedy fan. An Affair to Remember with Cary Grant and Deborah Carr, which was the basis, kind of a running theme of When Harry Met Sally. I said, man, that interaction with the Jane Pauley interview just reminded me of Nora Ephron. Right, with the texting and the Googling, when Dougie met Cammy, and I said, damn, this is synthetic all the way, and it is like something else. All right, enough fun for now. Let me talk a little bit about this Peter Schweizer book. He's Canadian national. I think he should write about Canadians for a change, although I appreciate his work with Clinton, Cash, and whatever. But he has his book called Profiles in Corruption, which is a corruption of the Kennedy ghost-written book, Profiles in Courage, right? And Kamala Harris figures prominently in one of 8 chapters. In fact, she's given position 1 as being one of the top corrupt people here. Profiles in Corruption. So she's on there, and Joe Biden's number 2. So, this is a marriage made in political heaven, what we're seeing right now unfold. And number 3 is another African-American. His name's Cory Booker. And I've teased him a time or two on this channel before. I'm saying, I'm more black than Cory Booker because both of his parents are VPs of Banco America. That is Bank of America, Transamerica now. And if you check their background, you probably find that they come from some sort of sorority or fraternity hookup, right? Cory Booker, I know, comes from Stanford, right? This is the whole Stanford mafia, right? Just like Banker Fried, Sam Bankman-Fried, right? Both of his parents teach law at Stanford Law. There's the Jewish financial mafia, right? Again, it's ethnic, color-based, religio-political groupings, which I'm all for. Okay, well, I grew up in the hood. You got it. And I watched American television in the 1950s. I wanted to be a Jewish comedian. All right, so I feel it. I understand it. Right. In fact, I want to change this channel here to call it the Professor Shlomo Hamamoto channel. So I can do my comedy. Shlomo Hamamoto, get it? Yeah, okay. So I understand that. By the way, Jews did live in our community before they were declared okay to live in the white neighborhood. So they moved out. So they left us behind. So Shlomo it is. All right. So don't you be accusing me of a racism or anti-Semitism or whatever it is. If there's anything, there's anti yellowism in the media, man. It's really pathetic. Or it's got to be Jackie Chan or someone like that. So you got anyway. There are any number of names that are associated with the corruption. It's the American way, and again, I've told you before, I'm okay with a moderate level of corruption. But when you're busting out the Social Security system, when you're engaged in Medicare types of transfers of funds, or you're doing cryptocurrency scams on the people, wiping them out, or looting people's pension funds, school teachers and firemen and policemen and health workers and sanitation workers. When you're doing that kind of stuff, I don't care what color, what religion you are, what gender, what type of sexuality that you profess to practice, you deserve to be held accountable. And if the crime is bad enough, you should be indicted and thrown in prison, such as biowarfare practice or directed toward the American people in the world. Those people need to be punished to the full extent of the law. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen, because of shows like this and because of people like you who are up on the news and are passionate about what humanity means, the love, right? Where is the love? That's Donny Hathaway. By the way, he went to Howard University. He was I was only focused on sororities, but Donny Hathaway, just to leave it on a positive note, okay? There are a lot of good people that talented people that came out of the sororities and the fraternities. One of them is Donny Hathaway, who died at age 33. He had perfect pitch. I know this because I interviewed a guy. His name's Michael Sasaki. He was a guitarist, Cold Blood, and a number of well-known groups. Donny Hathaway produced their first, second, third album, I think it was. He had perfect pitch, according to Michael Sasaki, and it's a and this is not from Michael, but there's a question whether Donny Hathaway jumped or was pushed, because I think he had some contractual problems with the wrong people, if you know what I'm talking about, right? That's Donny Hathaway. Howard University. He studied music there. And another alum, or they call them sorors, by the way. This is something I learned. SOROR. This is a sorority member, female sorority. They're called sorors or soror. It's Dinah Washington, which I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know she went to college, and I started looking into her. And not only is she a good singer, incredible jazz singer, and a pop singer, and I want to recommend you looking on TubeU, Broken Hearted Melody. All right, it's really great. 1963. I knew her as a pop singer. She's a jazz singer, and she also a jazz pianist, and came from Howard University. Was a sorority member. I learned from this book. Right. I'm only focusing on some of the people who are doing bad because we have to put them in the proper historical context so we can look out for ourselves. They look after each other. Who's looking out for us? Who's looking out for you and me? Right. It's the type of non-joiners, outliers like me who don't want a part of any type of organization, because so far as I'm concerned, any organization inevitably leads to oligarchy and power abuses. It's called the iron law of oligarchy. It exists in all systems, advanced or even tribal, right? The iron law of oligarchy. Jean Michel's, I think, or Robert Michel's, political scientist. Whether it's socialism, communism, capitalism, could be a theocracy. Oligarchies always come out of these little groups. So that's what we have to be on guard on. Not like, oh, he's a Democrat, he's a Republican, he's a conservative, he's a libertarian, and all these different labels, right? Beware the oligarchs, and let's keep them in check. Okay, I want to leave you on a high note. I want to give you a little bit of Remember that classic teaming up with Roberta Flack? I tell you, man, African American people are so accomplished, and so attainment and literacy and education is their norm. All right. What we're seeing being promoted, and I think Ye's trying to say, let's get off the plantation, the electropharmaceutical plantation. Let's get into ownership, right? We can all respect that as Americans, right? This is the deeper message that he's trying to communicate, and eventually that message is gonna win out, because there's like a 12, 13-year-old kids who are hearing Ye and have that in the back of their mind. It might not be Ye himself, like Moses never made it to the promised land, but he led his people right to it, up to it, to go into it. So yeah, high attainment. So just check a few bars out from Donny Hathaway. Check out his albums, The Ghetto, or Pieces of a Man. It's like a set me free. And then Roberta Flack, who, by the way, also was a teacher. So she went to college. I don't know if she was a member of a sorority, but here's some couple of bars of Where is the Love? Because that's what we need going into the Christmas season. Where is the love? Is that beautiful or what? Those harmony, that arrangement, it's everything. All right. So I asked Vice President Kamala Harris going into Christmas 2022, where is the love? And if you don't give us some love, we'll tell you to smell the coffee and back up off me. All right. And stop putting your men in prison. Set us free. No, don't set us free. Just open up the door, right? Like James Brown said, open up the door and I'll get it myself. All right. Okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you soon. I got a really good talk for you coming up on Thursday. It's about the underground cities in America where the elites are going to bug out to once it all goes down. World War III, it's on the horizon, perhaps. So anyway, we'll see you on Thursday, God willing. Thank you very much for your attention. Bye.